Today, I'm going to show you how to open up to a deeper experience of the divine so that the challenges in your life begin to shrink while the experiences of resonance expand. And then we'll anchor in what I've been sharing with you with a guided meditation and transmission so that you can experience what I've taught you for yourself. Hi, my name is Ken Stone. If this is your first time to my channel, I invite you to subscribe, click the bell to be notified, comment below, and if the video resonates with you, to like it. Let's dive in. I want to share with you a picture, a drawing that has been coming in for me over the last couple of weeks as a way of understanding the relationship and the linkage between spirituality and what we're experiencing at that deeper level energetically and practically what's going on in our lives. And let's just dive in. So, oops, I'm going to make that a little bit bigger here. So if we think about our lives as a circle, and within this circle, there are a number of different things that are taking place. One of them is that we're having an experience of self-talk, right? And I'm just going to label this self-talk. And in an experience of self-talk, we could be having negative self-talk or positive self-talk. Negative self-talk, I'm going to represent as spinning counterclockwise, and positive self-talk, I'm going to represent as spinning clockwise. And our self-talk, we can reprogram if we engage in certain types of activities. Maxwell Maltz wrote an incredible book back in the 1960s called Psycho-Cybernetics that has wonderful strategies for reprogramming our minds. But there's a limit to how much we can actually impact, the degree to which we can have a sustaining experience of resonance on every interior and exterior aspect of our lives. And that's impacted on a deeper level than just reprogramming our self-talk. And there are a couple of different things that influence that, but primarily it's how we respond to what is going on or what we're encountering internally, which I'm going to represent with this vertical line here. And sometimes the things that we're encountering internally in our lives, or at least the way that we're interpreting what's going on internally in our lives, can be very positive, and sometimes it can be very negative. And that is to say, we feel like we're encountering challenges, right? That's what I'm trying to say. And this has an impact on our self-talk. This is, let's just say this is our internal dynamic. And then there's another dynamic that's going on as well, and let's call that our external dynamic, which is to say, and I'm just going to label this external dynamic, which is to say how we're going about interacting with other people. And again, just for the sake of simplicity, let's refer to this as something that could be taking place in the context of a positive or a negative dynamic. That is to say, we might be interacting with other people in a positive way. And I want to suggest, or in a negative way, I want to suggest to you that how we are handling, how you are, how I am handling this internal dynamic is hugely influencing that external. And the external dynamic is also strongly influencing our internal self-talk. So we basically have these three components here. We have an internal dynamic, an external dynamic, and we have self-talk going on. And then I just want to represent with these two boxes here. These might be tools and resources for supporting the external and the internal dynamic. And if you've been sort of shifting in your life from a unconscious dynamic, either about what's going on internally, externally, or around your self-talk, into a more conscious dynamic where you're becoming aware of the role of what's happening on the interior of your life and how it's influencing those exterior experiences, you are likely already beginning to focus in on what are the tools and resources that you have available to you. And I'd like to represent those tools and resources in another drawing here. So we could say that there are tools and resources that are available at the level of the mind or thoughts. We could say that there are tools and resources, and I'm trying to draw a heart here, at the level of feeling. And we could say that there are tools and resources at the level of being. 1, 2, and 3. And the question really becomes, at what level of these ways that we can engage in these tools and resources, and I'm just going to flip back to the earlier picture, at what level can we actually make a sustaining difference in our lives? So if we think about this and look at the first level of the tools and resources and think about it at the level of the mind, the question is, can these sustain, right? If I have a happy thought or you have a happy thought, how long can that thought sustain without other resources being brought to bear? And we might measure it in terms of seconds or minutes or possibly hours, right? Maybe you've done exercises before where you've tried to hold a happy thought. But the challenge is that we have these habits, these ways of thinking that are influencing those thoughts, right? And we can see this in the earlier example. And some of those relate to our self-talk, some of them relate to our external dynamic, and some of them relate to the internal dynamic. Let me just change the color here so it's easy to see what I'm illustrating. And the challenge is, if these don't originate here, if these shifts in our thinking don't originate in the internal dynamic, it's very, very difficult to sustain these. And internal dynamics are much more than just about our thinking, aren't they? So if we look at this again, we want to look for not just resources that are taking place at the level of the mind, but also resources that are taking place at the level of feeling. But again, if we try to think our way into a feeling perspective, the question again becomes, how does this sustain? How can we sustain this in our lives? And again, I suspect that you've had an experience of this and the impact is fairly limited. The real question is, how do we move from thinking and feeling down into a being dynamic? Because it's really in the being dynamic where things begin to change and sustain in our lives in a meaningful way. And perhaps you've encountered some of the resources that are available through mindfulness. And in mindfulness, mindfulness says, I am not the thoughts that are happening in my mind. I'm not the feelings that are going on within my emotions. I'm over here, right? And we'll just flip back in color here. I'm over here. I'm the observer. And the question is, how do we move from an experience of the observer into an experience of being? That is to say, how do I move from I'm not the thoughts that I'm having and I'm not the feelings that I'm having to I am being who I really am? And the language that I like to use for this, although this is a little bit without context, it's difficult to conceptualize what this means, is to sink down in to the experience of who you already are. That is to say, if you're not the thoughts that you're having and you're not the feelings that you're having, what is the being expression that is underneath both of those? And I want to illuminate or illustrate this with the third drawing. So if we look at, and again, I'm just going to represent this at the level of thinking first. At the level of thinking, and I've got the calm seas and the rough seas here, at the level of thinking, I might be having a hard time or I might be having a good time, right? But the question is, how do I affect a change? And if I drop into a feeling perspective, I'm still being impacted on this level, right? So still, I might be feeling unhappy. But if I can sink down into the being experience, something different begins to happen. In happy times, the source of the resonance begins originating within me rather than as a function of the sun shining down on my life or happy thoughts or happy feelings that I'm having. And in unhappy times, I can sink down into the being experience of who I really am. And from my perspective as a spiritual teacher, who we all are is an undistorted expression and extension of the divine, which is to say, this level of being experience is going on all the time. No matter what happens to be happening up here at the surface, whether we're encountering things that are challenging or things that feel good to us. And so if we move back into this earlier model of understanding all of this, and let me flip to maybe a different color here, and we substitute in now resources that are about, let me see if that's visible. It doesn't look as visible as I wanted it to be, so I'm going to put it in red. If we make these resources, or we approach these resources from a being perspective, we begin to have positive experiences even when we're encountering a negative dynamic. And we also have a positive experience of who we really are that is available to support us in deepening our experiences on the positive end of the scale. And this immediately begins impacting not just our interior self-talk. When you're having a being experience of who you really are, a positive thing is unfolding all the time. And over time, you can't help but begin having positive self-talk. You don't even have to reprogram it. You could be having an experience of rough seas of life, yet underneath everything else is this being experience. And this is also then impacting the exterior dynamic of how we are interacting in other people's lives. And I think there's a lot more to share about this, but I really, really want to try to illustrate what happens when we sink down in at the deepest level. When we sink down into a very deep level, let's say we take a deep dive. What begins changing here is not just that we're having an interior experience that is contained at the level of being. We begin having an experience that resonates out into every part of our lives. Oops, it's not drawing out. All the way up. That is to say, our thoughts and our feelings are now being influenced by the deeper resonance and affirmative positive experiences of having that experience of, and I'm going to call this the divine within. This experience of the divine within is underneath everything else. So no matter what is going on at the level of thinking or feeling, by the way, this is happening, of course, over here as well. Oops. Oh, I lost my feed from my second screen here. Excuse me. I'm going to flip back. I think we got enough of the drawing taken care of. When it's happening at this deeper level, we're having an experience of at the deep dive level, we're having an experience of the divine within that is resonating out into every part of our life. And I want to explore this with just a few more words with you. And then I want to have an experience of the divine within. It's one thing to try to describe this, the interior dynamic of how I'm thinking and how I'm responding to what I'm encountering in my life and how that influences my self talk. If I'm having a deeper experience of who I really am, my interior self talk begins resonating in a deep way. And the impact of that begins expanding out into my life in a profound way. And that begins influencing the way that I'm interacting with other people as well. And it's not just my interactions with myself and other people. When I sink into that deeper experience of the divine within, it actually radiates and resonates up into every aspect of our lives. This is what is meant by the ancient wisdom, as above, so below. When we are having this deep experience below everything else, we begin having this experience at every other level, including the feeling level, including the thinking level, and eventually in the outward expression of our lives. And it all begins, from my perspective, at that deep interior experience of the divine within. That is where all of this originates. If we try to get into thinking or feeling or even observing, I am not my thoughts and my feelings, it's virtually impossible eventually from that silent observer to make the transition into I am being all of this. And when we do that, there is a transmutation that takes place. These earlier negative thoughts and feelings aren't being replaced by positive thoughts and feelings. They are being transmuted into to be the full undistorted expression of the being presence and the thinking presence that originates from the level of being. Okay, enough of the ideas. Let's have an experience together, shall we? And let's begin with a little meditation, and then we'll open into transmission. So, as always, I invite you to set aside everything else, energetically, emotionally, and otherwise. And with your eyes closed, breathing in and out through the nostrils, palms to the sky. As always, please don't operate a motor vehicle or heavy equipment of any sort during this or any time we're together. There are two reasons for that. One, it's not safe. You never know when you're going to drop out, when you're going to go into that deep level of being. Perhaps the thinking process stops for a while, even the feeling process. We're not trying to approach it from a thinking perspective, though. And so it can be a surprise sometimes when we go into that deeper feeling experience. So, really important not to be driving or really doing anything else. And second of all, when that experience begins to open up within you, if you're not doing something else, you can be present with whatever is unfolding. And that's absolutely essential. When we look at the tools and resources that influence the deep interior of our lives, I think what we discover over time is that when we allow ourselves to be present fully with whatever's coming up there, something profoundly different begins to take place. And we stop those patterns of suppression, of denial, even some addictive, maybe even all addictive processes eventually come to a very quiet place and melt away as we just allow ourselves to be who we are, not from thinking, not from feeling, but from a being perspective. Let's take a deep breath in and hold. And as you begin releasing this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before in this day at the level of thinking and feeling and maybe even being. For as you let go of all of that out to the count of 8, you release all the things that have been holding a stop sign up to the divine and make way for a more complete experience of who you really are underneath everything else. And another deep breath in and hold. As you begin releasing this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before since you were born, out to the count of 8. Again, thinking and feeling and being. For as you release all the ways, whether you associate them as experiences of dissonance or experiences of resonance, a more complete expression of divine presence gets to flood in when you let go, out to the count of 8. And one more deep breath in and hold. And as you begin releasing this breath now, letting go of everything that has come before since the inception of your soul, all the way out to the count of 8. The thoughts, the feelings, and the being that is expressed, opening up more fully to the divine mystery, expressing through you and in you and as you on every level of your being. Sometimes I feel drawn to share with lots of words and guided engagement and so on. And today, what I'd like to do is just move to the raw experience as much as we can together. So I'm going to guide you through a process that I call divine connecting breath. And then we're going to move into transmission together. That is to say, I'm going to begin working with you at that deeper level. And we'll just see what unfolds. Notice in your mind's eye, still with your eyes closed, breathing in and out through the nostrils, palms to the sky if it's comfortable for you. Just notice in your mind's eye that cue of breath in front of your face. You breathe in, it is replaced by another unit of breath, and you breathe that in and another unit of breath. This cue of breath supports you on every level of your being. It has no conditions, no criteria, no questions of you. It doesn't matter what kind of day you're having, whether you have a positive mental attitude right now or not. It doesn't matter where your self-talk is at, how you've interacted with others, how you're feeling internally. The breath comes in and serves you fully. In fact, whatever your perspective, whatever your gender or sexual identity, whatever your political beliefs or perspective, your ethnicity of origin, your spiritual or religious beliefs, none of it matters. The breath is flowing in to support and serve you. And in your mind's eye, you might notice in that cue of breath, the breath is beginning to change color, perhaps to a fixed color, or perhaps dynamic changing on an ongoing basis. If you're assigning a color with your imagination, you might pick a color not normally present in the body, except perhaps in your eyes. And then notice it's almost like food coloring in a pitcher of water in this cue of breath, the color begins infusing itself into the entirety of this cue. And with the next breath that you draw in, I just invite you to be with that breath from the perspective of the breath. The breath moves in through the nostrils and then up to the crown and then down into the lungs. And you can stay in your lungs there from that perspective and just notice as you continue breathing, this color continues to stream in and infuse itself into your lungs. And then it's almost like a marker, an indicator of how the breath moves through the body, the color to the interior lining of your lungs. And then if you move time forward very gently, smoothly, you might notice the color beginning to infuse itself into the bloodstream and then eventually into every single cell in your body. And there's a simple conclusion that we can draw looking at all of this. And I just invite you to notice on whatever level you feel it or see it or know it or sense it, and honor that fully. The breath is becoming you, and you are becoming the breath. You might have a sense in your body at the level of your skin or some other level where you feel a physical resonance, a yes. Well, yes, that's true. You might sense it in your mind. You might know this is true, of course, right? The oxygen, lungs, bloodstream, cells, yes. You might see it intuitively, or you might be imagining it with your imagination in your mind's eye, that color beginning to infuse itself through the entirety of your being. The breath is becoming you, and you are becoming the breath. And as you expand your awareness then beyond your lungs and even the cue of breath, perhaps even out to see the entire planet, you might notice the breath of the planet is the place where that cue of breath that serves you comes from. And so it is with each of your neighbors and your neighbors' neighbors and so on. And it's by that breath that you draw in and out that you are connected to all those people. For with each breath, you are connected to everyone else who is also breathing the breath of the planet directly by your breath. Indeed, it's not just the people, it's everything. The animals, the insects, the trees, the rocks, the dirt, the water, the fish, everything. With each breath, you are connected to everyone and everything above, upon, and within the planet itself. Sometimes the mind can get involved here and start to wonder, well, what am I sharing beyond the breath? Or I hadn't thought about that. What about those people over there? They don't believe what I believe, or those people are doing things that don't seem right to me, or that person is doing something or saying something that doesn't resonate with me. I don't want to be connected with them. It's that innate sense of separation that ultimately leads to a sense of disconnection from ourselves and a sense of disconnection from the divine. And as it turns out, the breath of the planet is in fact serving everyone without condition or criteria. But it's not a vector through which you acquire their stuff or share their beliefs or their perspective. You're entitled to your perspective, of course. It's just that underneath all of the things that we think separate us as human beings, there is something that unifies us. And one way that we can begin uncovering that on an experiential level is to remember with each breath, you are connected to all those people by your breath. And not just people, everything. There's no disconnection. We are all connected. And in fact, it's not just the planet, right? The breath of the planet touches the edge of space and in turn every other part of space eventually. And so we can say with each breath, you are connected to everyone and everything throughout the entire cosmos, including that energy that underwrites everything, the divine, a light perhaps at a great distance initially. At least we might perceive it that way, on the other side of the cosmos. Yet notice as you continue breathing, eyes still closed, palms to the sky, in and out through the nostrils, that light coming closer with each breath, eventually close enough that you can perceive those twin frequencies that together express as the divine. The essence of the divine, the frequency of the divine, and the frequency of perfect health intertwine such that there is no separating one from the other. And not just perfect health as we understand it as human beings, perfect physical health, perfect emotional, perfect spiritual, and so on. It's all the iterations of perfect health, even those far beyond our ability to understand, comprehend, or even imagine, contained within that light, intertwined such that where one aspect is present, so too the other, that light expressing out, connecting, underwriting every aspect of the cosmos. Eventually, you might perceive that light as connecting in with you, perhaps initially at your nostrils, and then instantaneously through every level of your being, known and unknown. The invitation extended to each of the smallest aspects of you. Come return to your natural state of resonance and alignment as the artifacts of resonance and dissonance fall away and gather at the universal drain. For whatever remains in separation, I invite you to remove the universal plug. I'll do the same. Let's begin. Don't worry about the words. It's just a way of perceiving what is actually real. Underneath everything else is the divine. The divine is becoming you, and you are becoming the divine, just as the breath is becoming you, and you are becoming the breath. Right now, you might be thinking, I'd like to have an intention, or my intention today was X, Y, and Z. But I invite you, at least for the duration of our time together, to drop your intentions. For intentions in this context are an expression of control. They're a stop sign to the divine. In particular, they're a stop sign to your deeper experience of the being presence underneath everything else. Underneath thoughts of the divine or feelings of the divine within your being is divine presence at the level of your hips. But you don't need to push your awareness into your hips. It will fall into your hips. The center of gravity in your being may have been up in your head or your heart in the centers of thinking or feeling, yet it will descend lower into the hips to the center of your being presence. the place where you encounter and experience the divine within. Not because you need to hold an intention or have held an intention, but because this is who you really are. The invitation is to sink in and be who you really are, not as a function of the thoughts of who you really are, nor even of the feeling of who you really are. Both of these can be let free with each breath that you release. And as you release the breath, the being experience unfolds more deeply within your body. Not a being experience that originates within me and is being sent to you. Not that. It is the being presence of the divine enlivened within you by the being presence of the divine within me. God's expression as me in transmission, where we are now together, sitting even deeper, sinking down into the experience of who you really are, enlivens who you really are within you. And not even because of anything that I'm saying. For we could sit together in absolute silence, and the resonance of your being presence will expand. And not because I said it. There is no commandment of it. It is true. Just like the breath is becoming you and you are becoming the breath. We could speak of it, but it's no more true with words than it is in silence. The breath is, in fact, becoming you, and you are becoming the breath. It's happening whether we say anything or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. When we take some time to sink into the being experience of the divine within, everything else begins to be reset. The thoughts that have been dominant fall away. The feelings that have been dominant fall away. And in their place, the eruption of divine presence emanating up through the core of your being, through every cell in your body, through every aspect of the field that is you. An expression, an undistorted expression of the divine within you. As you sink in deeper, be with whatever experience is coming up for you. From the perspective of language, which is born of separation, the words that come to me to describe what is happening are soul embodiment, the individuated expression of the divine, your soul, your spirit, descending and coming home to who you really are. The standing wave and expression of this undistorted being presence of the divine through every aspect of your being, through your heart, through your feelings, through your mind, through your thoughts, most significantly through the being presence, through being present. If you end up with any noise filtering in, perhaps a feeling or a thought that related to something that was going on earlier, or if we think about the ocean up at the surface of your life, choppy waves, smooth ocean, or choppy either way, just remind yourself with each breath, you are connected to everyone and everything, the divine, the light, the twin frequencies connecting into each of the smallest aspects of you on every level, known and unknown. The divine is becoming you, and you are becoming the divine. And with that little extra support, the resonance begins unfolding at a deeper level within. There's so much more available here. Having explored and shared this with many, many other people for more than 10 years now, more than 12 years, actually. I have language to describe it, perhaps even drawings to demonstrate or illustrate what is happening. But at the end of the day, it's all about sinking in to the experience of who you already are. No matter what else is going on at that deeper level, once we sink down to the level where the sunlight or absence of sunlight is not filtering down, we're at a deep enough level in the metaphorical ocean of our lives, in our hips, in our being presence, we discover the light originates in you rather than beyond you. And with this profound shift, the resources and tools to support the interior dynamic of encountering whatever challenges or opportunities, whatever positivity or negativity, whatever resonance or dissonance may come up, when the support and the perspective is at this depth and deeper, something profound begins changing in a sustaining way. If we do this one time, it's interesting. Perhaps it's meaningful. If we do it again and again and again and again, it becomes significant. It becomes a profound anchor and reference for the integration, the embodiment of who you really are on every level of your being, not just your being presence, not just your feeling, your heart, not just your thinking, your mind, but every outward expression as well. Your relationships with others, with yourself, with the divine, the resonance your body is experiencing, and on and on and on and on. All of these things profoundly impacted in this way. I want to do a couple of things. First of all, I want to bring our the transmission here to a close in just a moment. And once I do, I want to extend an invitation to you to take an even deeper dive, to explore at a deeper level. And then we'll wrap up our time together for this video for today. First things first, I invite you to begin returning the universal plug as I begin doing the same and bring this transmission to a close. Second, if this experience has resonated with you, if you'd like to explore at this level and even deeper, I invite you to explore and participate and register for the upcoming deep dive workshop. If it resonates with you, if you'd like to explore at this level and even deeper, you can join me and an extraordinary group of people from around the world for the next deep dive workshop. You can do that by following the link below in the description or on the page, or you can visit deepdiveworkshop.com. If you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and click the bell to be notified anytime a new video is released or I do a live stream. You'll be notified on email from YouTube directly. To comment below, there's an opportunity for us to engage in a deeper conversation, and I welcome that opportunity. Whatever may be coming up that you'd like to share and give voice to, please do comment below, and I look forward to following up with you in the comments there. And finally, I invite you to engage at a deeper level as well with the community. There's a link below where you can subscribe to my newsletter, or you can visit me at kenwstone.com. And of course, if this video resonates with you, please do give it a thumbs up. I look forward to gathering again with you soon for the deep dive workshop, if that resonates with you, and in all the other ways that we gather as a community and explore and sink down to an experience of who you really are. Until we're together again very soon, much love and peace.